Hi, my name is Alex Dolphin. Welcome back to another episode of Ex Ante. Today we're going to discuss the case Ford versus Montana. This case was heard in the Supreme Court of the United States in the year 2020. Let's go ahead and jump into the facts of the case. So there are two plaintiffs here, and they are suing Ford, alleging products liability. So they're saying a couple of cars were not manufactured properly, and they led to one case death and the other personal injury. Now Ford is not challenging the merits of their claim. What Ford is challenging is they're saying neither of these state courts has the ability to exercise personal jurisdiction over us as the defendant in this state. So personal jurisdiction is the ability of a court to adjudicate an issue with an out-of-state defendant. Well, Ford isn't headquartered in Montana or Minnesota. And furthermore, Ford is arguing that the court can't even exercise out-of-state jurisdiction here underneath international shoe because they did not have a causal relationship with this forum. There's no causal link between Ford's actions and the accidents that occurred in either of these forums. Okay, so let's explain that a little bit more. Neither of these cars were sold in Minnesota or Montana in the two forums. Let's just focus on Montana. The car was not sold in Montana. It was sold out of state and then brought in Montana many years later, right? It's a used vehicle. And Ford is saying that if you're going to exercise specific personal jurisdiction, the language is that you can only exercise that jurisdiction over the defendant so far as their contacts give rise to the suit. And they're saying, well, we didn't sell this car directly into Montana. It kind of made its way into Montana in a roundabout way. And so there's no causal relationship between our activities as a corporation and the accidents that occurred in Montana. And they would concede that if they sold this car directly to a plaintiff in Montana and then that person got hurt, then yes, that would be fine to exercise personal jurisdiction there. But because this car was sold by Ford to a person in another state and then brought in after the fact, they're saying there's no causal link. And these states cannot exercise specific personal jurisdiction over us as the defendant here. Now, the Supreme Court rejects that, and the judgment is unanimous, but there are a few competing opinions. The first opinion is by Justice Kagan. She writes for the majority, and she basically expands upon this language that's in a case Daimler. And what that language says is you're subject to specific personal jurisdiction so long as the lawsuit arises out of or relates to the defendant's contacts with the forum. So arises out of or relates to. And generally that had just been read as one statement. But what Kagan does is she parses that with the phrase or, and to basically make this into a disjunctive test where either one of these could satisfy specific personal jurisdiction. She's saying there doesn't need to be a causal link, but if it relates to. So if the lawsuit relates to the defendant's contacts with the forum. So the argument of the majority is, well, Ford certainly has contacts with Montana. They sell tons of cars in Montana. They advertise their cars in Montana. They advertise used cars in Montana. And they've sold this specific model of car in Montana before. So they're saying that this claim relates to Ford's contacts with the forum of Montana. It might not arise out of, there's no direct causal link, is what she would argue, but it relates to. And so there's an affiliation, there's a relationship, and there's a connection between the defendant's contacts with the forum and the claim that is brought. And so that's what the majority holds. They say, we recognize that there's going to be a hairy issue where we're going to have to answer what the internet means and how specific personal jurisdiction is going to be exercised over retailers who sell through the internet. But they essentially punt on that question. They say we're going to save it for another day. Justice Alito, he does not like what the majority does, and he just says, there's no reason for us to abrogate existing case law. There's no reason for us to change the law. The law that we have that exists right now handles this case just fine. We don't need a new rule here. Ford had contacts with the forum. It had contacts with Montana. And the fairness factors, don't seem to cut in Ford's favor. They sell tons of products into Montana, and so it doesn't seem like it would be unfair to make them litigate this case in Montana. He also says, personal jurisdiction is a defendant-centered theory, but he says, if these plaintiffs can't litigate in Montana, where the heck are they supposed to go? They supposed to fly to Delaware? He's like, how are they going to litigate anywhere if they can't litigate in Montana? Justice Gorsuch and Justice Thomas also file a concurring opinion. Justice Gorsuch also, goes along the same lines as Justice Alito, where he says he doesn't really love this relate to test. All that means is there needs to be an affiliation, a connection, some type of relationship. And he says, if we kind of just reject this causal link altogether, what we're going to do is we're going to open up the floodgates for tons of litigation. There is a spectrum between an isolated sale in a forum and a continuous defendant's continuous sales in the forum. And that spectrum, this is not a bright line rule. This is kind of a standard and a spectrum where a lot of litigators are going to need to argue about what are continuous contacts versus what are isolated or sporadic contacts. And he doesn't necessarily think that that's a great idea. It's not going to be super efficient. And he does recognize it's going to create a lot of issues with the internet. And I think that implied in his opinion is a sense that this opinion will certainly be relied upon in future litigation about whether sales through the internet are going to constitute minimum contacts and would render a defendant subject to specific personal jurisdiction in a forum. Finally, he just speaks about how international shoe might be a little bit outdated. This was a case that was decided close to 100 years ago, and we are essentially, our society has moved so far, our business practices have moved so far since then that maybe this test doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and maybe we ought to come up with a new test. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.